review. Book review. Book review. Book review.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name's Adara. So back at the beginning of 2018, Pewdiepie created a personal bucket list goal for himself to read as many books as he possibly could. In the end, he ended up reading a total of 73 books and novellas in the span of a year. Pretty impressive shit, I must say. I've loved to read for the longest time, but I absolutely cannot read that fast. Honestly, I can't read fast at all. I've always been an extremely slow person at everything that requires mental work, and reading is no exception. It's just one of my weaknesses, I suppose. At least I can confidently say that I'm pretty accurate most of the time if I'm allowed to complete tasks and questions at my own pace, so yeah, an eye for an eye. But anyways, enough about me. Back to Felix. When he started making a book series, I was completely in love with the idea. I've never seen book reviews before, and it's always been a hobby and passion I've never had anyone to really talk about it with, so I really looked forward to seeing the books Felix had read during the month and what his thoughts on them are. Sadly, I've never really heard of like 99% of the books he recommended. But I didn't care, because I genuinely adored seeing him talk about his new hobby that he enjoyed so passionately, not to mention all his detailed thoughts and critiques to each individual story and piece, and I got some good recommendations out of it. Unfortunately, I had to stop reading for a good amount of years for various personal reasons, but I always wanted to go back to it since I've always cared for the medium of literature, and I want to become an author myself eventually. So the more videos Felix did, the more my Amazon wishlist for books grew, and I told myself, when I have the time, I'll read these books. If you have been subscribed to my channel for some time now, you might have recalled that in the last video I made, I said that uploads would take much slower because I started studying. Yeah, it's October 2020 as I'm recording this, and this is my second comeback video. But hey, look at the bright side. At least I took this time wisely to read and consume a lot of content to share on this channel. So, yay! And I promise to be consistent on this channel from now on. So please subscribe if you want to see more videos of me. The ones every other Wednesday and anime videos on my twin channel every other Saturday. But anyways, while I studied, I picked up the hobby to read a bit. So I took some of Felix's recommendations in the meantime to have a healthy hobby that would challenge my mind while I was in a period of intense concentration. And then some months later, the pandemic happened. For obvious reasons, I was extremely sad and heartbroken that the world stopped working, basically. But since the world kinda took this big of a break, I guess that means I have some free time on my hands. So why not use it productively? So it's time that I finally started hardcore reading again. So what better way to start than Pewdiepie's book list? I didn't read every single book Felix recommended, however. Some books were way too expensive, rare in my country's Amazon, or I just straight up didn't really care for. Still, seeing the type of taste Felix has for this kind of thing was quite pleasant, not gonna lie. I really like this kind of content best since I feel like we get to know a little bit more about what kind of person Felix is. Not Pewdiepie, but Felix himself. But without further ado, ladies and gents, here is my reviews for the books I read that were recommended by Pewdiepie. If you want to skip on any particular reviews, I'll leave in the description of this video. Also, the script ended up being a lot longer than I thought, so I probably am going to divide this video into 2 parts so it's easier and more digestible for the audience to see. Book 1. Stoner by John Williams. So this was one of the first books that I was interested in reading to take on this Pewdiepie book challenge I set out for myself when the pandemic started. I've always liked humble and simple slice of life story concepts like this one, so I was definitely expecting a nice relaxing read. And it was for the most part, but it wasn't necessarily the happy kind of relaxing. Stoner, the main character, has an extremely and extraordinarily normal life. He was born on a farm, works on it until he reaches the age of 20, expecting nothing more to come out of his life. Until one day, his dad offers to him some of his saving he's been collecting for him to go to college. Stoners then accept this money, and the story begins. And just as the beginning sounds kind of unexciting and anticlimactic, that's really a consistent tone for the rest of the book. Stoner is nothing more, but also nothing less, about the life of a normal man. He meets people, learns things, falls in love, gets heartbroken, loses things extremely important to him, keeps moving forward, and eventually passes away, just like every other person on this planet. You might be asking yourself at this point, Jesus, woman, why the heck would I want to read something so boring? But the truth, my dear viewer, is that just because there is no excitement in the story or any kind of abnormal elements, doesn't mean that the story is boring. Far from it. That simplicity is what drew me to this book, because it's so grounded, it's extremely relatable, it's human at its most literal and purest forms. Because the truth is, most people do live ordinary lives just like Stoner. Different, of course, but still ordinary. And to me, that fact really makes it easier for this book to deeply pierce my heart, getting me immersed and caring deeply for the main character and everybody involved. Well, at least everybody that was good anyway. From the very first chapter, I was already 100% invested on how this man's life would go, and how it would develop, and what would happen next. I think this is honestly the fastest I ever got invested to a character in any piece of fiction, and I truly think that's a pretty magical thing. It's not for everyone, of course, especially if you're one of those people that asked why would I care about something so boring a little while ago. But if you enjoy a beautifully melancholic slice of life, there's no better book than checking this one out. Book 2, The Dice Man by Rhinehart. Yeah. Felix didn't like this book, and I can definitely see why. I will say, however, that I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than him, but don't get me wrong though. It's not a great book, by a long shot. I would even argue that's not even good, really. But I will give it one thing. This book definitely was eccentrically entertaining. At least for a little while. To give a bit of context, the book is about a psychologist called Rhinehart. Yes, the same guy as the author, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So Luke here has a very successful normal life. He has 2 lovely kids, earns really well as a psychologist, is extremely smart, handsome, and has the hottest wife anyone could ever dream of. But there's a catch. He's bored out of his fucking mind. Things are too easy and peaceful, and this basically is the tip that ends up making him to tumble into insanity. One day after a gambling night with his friends, he stares at something that is covering a single dice. He doesn't know what number is on top, so he bets. If there's a 6 on top, or a 1, I don't really remember, I'ma go and rape my best friend's wife. And guess what? It was one of those numbers. So he ends up raping her. And that's the ball that kicks the story's gears into motion. What follows is the descent of a man's sanity as he basically lives off betting with the dice, which he follows religiously no matter how absurd or ridiculous the results of the throw are. So various things happen in the book. For example, in the beginning, there is a lot of brainwashing of Rhinehart's innocent patients. He does a lot of crazy experiments, a lot of coitus, and seriously, I really do mean a lot of coitus. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. This author was very horny, my dudes. Sometimes the scene is built well, other times it's just kind of random, sometimes it's violent, you name it, it's there. At the end, the preaching of the dice spreads so much, it becomes popular all over the United States. And there are even clubs themed with the practice of the dice rolls. So what are the pros and cons of this book? Surprisingly, a lot of people absolutely adore this book. I would even say they adore it a little too much, like cultish religiously wise. these people were so enlightened by this concept of living by the die that they started basically living just the way Luke Rhinehart did. But just because something is a cult classic and loved by many doesn't necessarily make it a good book. The biggest selling point, I believe, is the plot, which is definitely interesting as it's something that could take you to infinite possibilities and outcomes. And I think the way the author goes about it is pretty good, but after a few chapters, well, the book kind of starts to become really boring. It gets to a point where the appeal of the plot gets washed out, so no matter what Luke does in the book, kind of stop caring, because you feel like the point was already made. Yes, Luke turned into an insane sociopath with multiple personality disorder. So what? In the end, unlike Stoner, you don't really have a reason to give a shit about Luke and any of the characters. Honestly, the biggest reason for this is just everyone in this book is an asshole. Like, seriously, there isn't a single redeeming character in this entire novel, which is the biggest turn-off you could possibly offer me in storytelling. Because to me, one of the biggest selling points of a story is the characters. So if you have shitty ones, to me it just straight up sucks. These characters are just tools to serve the plot, and once the thing you wanted to say is said, you're just stretching shit out unnecessarily, making it awkward, longer than it needs to be, and straight up washed out tediousness. So yeah, I forced myself to finish this book. It definitely took me longer than many of the other books I had to read, both because of length and my indifference overall towards the story. There are a couple of interesting questions raised about this book, however. As you notice, the author and the MC have the same name, making you think that this book might have been autobiographical at the first thought. But thankfully, as you might guess, if you're an American, you've never heard of anything like this happening in your history books, so it's definitely just fiction. The wondering thing is also, if it's not autobiographical, does the author have at least some similarities to the MC? Surprisingly, no! The real name of the author is George Powers Cockcroft. But yeah, that would explain why there are so many freaky scenes in this book. Getting back to it, the guy was born in 1932 and is now an old man who lives nearby New York. And according to an interview I read a while back before reading the book, he is the chillest dude that you're ever going to meet. From what I can remember, he's only actually used the dice once in his whole life. And he used it to ask a girl out, who, wholesomely enough, ended up turning into his wife. Lastly, there's even a sequel to this book. Is it any good? I have no clue, because really, I don't care enough to find out. Book 3, Mythos by Stephen Fry. Alright, let me fangirl a bit. I fucking love this book. God damn it was so good and so much fun to read. I feel so sad that Felix didn't enjoy it as much, but I suppose it's kind of the thing that makes us different, right? Anyways, if you have even any remote interest in Greek mythology and have no clue where to start, this, my dude, this is where you learn your goods. The book goes in chronological order from the very beginning when the earth and the cosmos were formed up until the 12 Greek Olympian gods are officially established. There's plenty of extra stories and content with these gods and other beings such as magical creatures and humans as well. I've been wanting to get into Greek mythology for a while now, and I swear, after this book, I feel like I went from level 1 noob to at least level 50 pagan or something. Because in fact, Stephen made a sequel to Mythos called Heroes, which I've bought but I haven't had the chance to read yet, talking about the great heroes and their stories of Greek mythology like Perseus and Heracles. That's Hercules for all you peasants who've only seen the Disney movie. Also, don't feel bad, because I was one of these peasants up until a few months ago. I always felt like being into Greek mythology made you part of this little nerdy community group, and I really feel like I'm a part of it now. The most enjoyable part of reading the book to me was how Stephen Fry made these ridiculous stories sound 10 times funnier than the original versions. The way he tells the story really makes me laugh and shake my head at the absurdities of these beings. I felt like I could never get enough of it. To conclude, if you want to get into it, I highly recommend this book. When you're done, I want you to look at this meme. Did it make you chuckle? If it did, then welcome to the Myth Nerd Club, pal. And if you want more good nerdy Greek mythology shit, I would recommend Percy Jackson as well, because I most certainly started reading it after this. Book 4, Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So the first thing I thought as Felix was reviewing this book was, shit, the story really sounds like it was written by a Latin American author. The reason I thought this was because the most common style of writing between the Latino writer community of the last century was always absurd fantastical fantasy. And that's the tone I get from the story of a workaholic man who turns into a giant roach and can only think about, how the heck am I going to get to work now? But sadly enough, I was mistaken. Because a quick Google search later, I found out that Kafka is actually from the Czech Republic, which I know nothing about. Maybe our styles are similar, maybe not. But anyways, even though I was wrong about the origins of the author, I was still intrigued by this novella's concept and bought a copy to read. Quite surprisingly, this book is extremely popular in Latin America, even though he's not a Latin American author himself. A few months before I started reading again, I was talking to a classmate from my entrance exam course that I was taking. She, like me, also lived in Bolivia for a period of her life. It was actually assigned this book in her school, which I found pretty dope, and it gave me even more reason to want to check it out. There isn't much to say about this book's premise other than that he turns into a roach and has an extremely difficult life from then on. Nobody knows why. It just happened. It seems that a lot of Kafka's work is revolved around commentary towards what makes a person human, and the stories are all filled with tragedy. To explain a bit more, the reason why the MC is such a workaholic is because he is basically financially maintaining his entire family, consisting of his parents and his sister, because he genuinely believes that they need him to survive. Well, that definitely wasn't the case, because they lived just fine without the Roach MC. Well, besides now having to take care of him, which to the family definitely became a disgusting nuisance. And what was the result in the end? Well, I think you'll have to read it to find out for yourself. Kafka's work catalog is not that big, but regardless of that, when he wrote decently. He gave his messages, accomplished his goals, and that was that. And I said in the beginning, the style is Latino-like, but I never said that I love all Latino artists in shorts. I feel like Metamorphosis was kind of dragged and would have worked much better as a short story instead of a novella. There's way too much detail that's benign and therefore hard to care about. But thankfully, unlike the Dice Man, it wasn't so long that it made me want to hit my head on the wall. So in the end, I'm not mad at it. I just don't think I'll ever want to read it again, that's all. Book number 5, American Psycho by Easton Ellis. Oh yeah, this is the most special out of the bunch. Out of all the books Felix read, I think this is the one that gave me the strongest, I don't even know, dude, impact? Reaction? The one that stuck in my head the most? I guess all of that would be accurate. I just had the most to think about, reflect, and say about this book. So it's about a rich psychopath that loves killing people. And I kind of like dark, twisted stuff, but I wasn't prepared for this, man. Nothing is going to prepare you for this. There is so much descriptive violence in this book, man. I honestly did not think it would affect me as bad as it did at the very beginning, at least. And the reason why is because the first victim Patrick ever kills is an old, defenseless, homeless dude. They're my weakness, man. I can't see old people get hurt, especially if they're homeless. It tears me apart. So naturally, I had to stop reading halfway through it because I was straight up not feeling well. And there was another reason why I wasn't prepared for all this violence. Felix. Oh my god. Just play the clip. Just play the clip, man.
I wanted to read something more simple, something lighter. So I decided to read American Psycho, which is a very dark satire comedy. Just following that was so funny. I found myself laughing out loud so often while reading this, which was honestly great.
Pewds, my dude, how, why, in the ever-loving fuck did you think that this book was funny? I was baffled, to say the least. So I went to Reddit, because nothing like the internet to heal people's degenerate opinions about anything. Surprisingly though, even though I expected everybody to be a jerk, the book subreddit is filled with pretty nice people. A lot of them explained a little bit about the whys and the hows of the book, and after reading people's surprisingly polite perspectives, I decided to keep reading because I had a gut feeling I could get something out of it. I mean, definitely not joy, but something. Thankfully, I was right. At first, my reasoning was to keep reading so I can understand the perspective of a psychopath for future antagonist/villain creations for my stories. But I got much more than that. The book has two main philosophies to teach: the true benignness of consumerism and the pressures of perfectionism in young adults. The prior is shown by a consistent amount of Patch's jargon when it comes to his normal daily routines, fashion, musical reviews, as well as other things. As a reader, you eventually get exhausted about all of this useless and pointless commentary to the story, and beg to read literally anything else that the book can offer, which, in this case, is unfortunately the gory pornography. After reflecting on it when I finished the book, I realized one thing: all of this useless information that we had, like what kind of suits is best to wear with a tie, and all the things we buy only serve one purpose: to feed the capitalistic economy. And, at the end of the day, none of this shit really fucking matters, because besides a small group of people who might share the same interests as you, nobody could literally care less. Granted, realizing this did hurt my fragile ego a little bit, since all I feel I have of value at times is my abundant knowledge on benign subjects. But I suppose it's in a relatively kind kick to the butt to try to spend our time on subjects and knowledge that is more important for our well-being, instead of giving a shallow image to the world. Which brings me to my second point. The book is quite subtle about this, I believe, because after all, the story is about the life of a rich psychopath. But for the normal people out there is clearly a message about how society expects you to be perfect, successful, smart adult as soon as possible. Not necessarily rich per se, but definitely adds to the point of the book tries to make. Everything about Patrick is nothing but hollow. On the outside, he has everything society wants from him, but on the inside, he's nothing. And this comes from everyone else's perspective of him as well. Nobody truly cares for Patrick as an individual. He's just another tool used for these rich people to look more appealing or get information, hanging out with his friends and acquaintances, for example. Or to get something from him, for example, his girlfriend Evelyn. This is emphasized on the fact that there are many people that can't even remember Patrick's first name. Not that he does either at times, but I digress. Even those who felt affection for Patrick are just as blind as everyone else. Let's take, for example, the characters Louis and Jean. Louis, I believe, just lusted for Patrick and confused it for love. Jean was a much kinder soul who genuinely was in love with Patrick, but that love came from an illusion of what she believed he was. She was in love with the idea of Patrick, not Patrick himself. Granted, she wanted to know him more. It was probably the kindest and most genuine person Patrick had in his entire life, but it still wouldn't have been a healthy relationship. Nobody with him would, because Patrick is a psychopath. Him aside, what the story is trying to tell the normal reader is that if you do not find happiness and fulfillment in your own life, no amount of power, beauty, and success in society's eyes will ever truly matter, which was the author's intention, and successfully delivered for those capable of seeing beyond the pornographic gore. To sum up, the story can be funny to some, but definitely not to me. So I'm sorry, Felix, but I just do not agree with you. It has a lot of redundant information and is all over the place at times, which actually makes it easier to read, because you can speed through the parts and you won't miss much. You get surprisingly desensitized to the gore with time, and it's kind of intriguing to see things progress through the eyes of the unreliable narrator, as all psychos are in books, until things end anticlimactically by going into a full circle. In the end, nothing changed. No justice was made, which you realize after thinking about it for a while that this is what the whole point is, which makes you smile cynically to yourself and think, we truly are all a fucked up species. This book is as balanced as work as it can be, and it's very well written. But the true question here is it a cult classic? I think it depends on who you ask. For those who just see an edgy, gory book, absolutely not. But for people like me who can see above the surface, absolutely, yes, this is a cult classic. Just as I always share my stupid and benign knowledge on things that don't matter that much, I don't know if anybody is going to care about these words that I'm saying right now, but it's something that I wanted to do. And with that being said, I feel like it's my responsibility to say, this is not the exit. And with that, we conclude part 1 of this little mini series of videos. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that good shit to help my channel grow. Please click the bell icon, and that way you'll be notified when part 2 gets released. So yeah, thank you everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day. And remember, just stay determined. TTFN guys!